Great, that's the sound that I need to know. So I'm now recording and I'll be able to sort you through. So welcome everyone to the free sleep school session. So thanks very much for joining me. I'm very happy to have you here tonight. I've been doing these, I think this is the third or fourth one that I've been doing, which has been really great. I've done a couple in the evening and this done one in the afternoon. So I'm just working out the time that works best, and I'll probably rotate it because obviously everyone's got busy lives and trying to get their little ones down. So I appreciate that. But thank you for joining today. So let me just start off by introducing myself. I'm Kate Cohen, and I run Sleep Time Consulting. So I started Sleep Time Consulting. It was called a different name. It was called Sleep Time Baby in the beginning, 5 years ago, which is pretty amazing, really. It's kind of 5 years ago this month. So I'm very happy still to be helping people out with their sleep. And it was all born out of a situation that we had ourselves. So my son, who is now 8 years old, was having difficulty sleeping. He wasn't doing well at all. He barely slept through the night. So I was exhausted. I was working, in an office job in London. And I was just drained and exhausted, and my husband and I just basically had hit rock bottom. And it at that stage in the world, like, there wasn't many sleep consultants out there. It wasn't really a known thing. So we hired our sleep consultant, and basically we solved the problem within 3 days. I was like, oh my gosh, what have we been doing wrong? And we learned a lot in that process, but it sort of drove me to learn more about sleep. Because I was sort of fascinated why I didn't know everything. And I think the information just wasn't out there. And it's still quite hard to find definitive information for people that's right and is, I suppose, balanced and adaptable to your situation. So that is why I do what I do, because I love sharing the information. That's what I'm doing tonight, because for me, it's really, really important that I share the information to help you make the right choices for your child. So 5 years down the line, still loving what I do, and I've helped, gosh, wish I knew the exact number, but it's got to be over 1,000 families get their sleep back on track, and I will continue to do so until I decide not to. So yeah, a little bit about me. So just in terms of what I can do to help you, just to outline that, just in case you get to the end of this and you're not quite sure, you've got an idea, or you're just a bit confused and want to kind of maybe get some more support. So I have a quick chat option. So that's, kind of a half an hour call. That means that we can just go through everything, in that call, and you don't get anything written up, but it's good for troubleshooting. So things like early rising, perhaps, or short naps, or just something you kind of want to run over. Maybe you've hit a bit of a bump in the road. The next sort of option that I have is the most popular stuff that I do. So this is the one-to-one options. So this is basically levels of support and levels of bespoke plan that's written for you. They start from £110, as it says there, and they go up to my top level plan, which is £345, which is basically me holding your hand through the whole session. And they're the most popular, I think, because they're the ones that are really focused around getting the right results for you in a way that works. And they're very good for kind of making sure that you get a full service on there. And I love doing those as well. But my newest thing, and the one that I'm really, really passionate about, and is also very, very popular, I've helped over 150 people through Sleep School. So Sleep School is my way of tapping into my online course, which I have in existence, which you can just buy off the shelf like other online courses. But I decided to add another layer onto it and make Sleep School just before lockdown last year. So it's been going for quite a while. And with Sleep School, what you get is you get the online course, but you also get a bespoke sleep summary delivered to you after you filled out a questionnaire. And then you get 2 weeks of me and a Facebook group answering your questions every day. So it's really focused on giving you that kind of bespoke support, but for a very low price point, because it's in a group function and it's a really friendly way of doing it. Lots of people are always in the same boat, and it's really nice to kind of walk through that journey. I've just finished one now, and I just, I love hearing the comments and the transformations of people's work. New this time round is going to be, and I'll tell you where the next one starts, is going to be the video calls that we're going to do. So this is going to be much more focused on 3 video calls across the process so that you can do something like this, basically kind of face to face. So that's what I can do to help, but that's not what you're necessarily here for. Today I want to talk to you around kind of 6 elements of my take on the sleep fundamentals. So what do you kind of need to know? So we'll crack on. The first thing to understand is that sleep cycles are key. This is the nugget of information that I didn't know when I was with both my son and my daughter. My daughter's older, and a sleep cycle is essentially the journey that we all go on as babies, as adults, and as kind of toddlers and little ones. Everyone goes through a sleep cycle. The newborn sleep cycle is about 35 minutes long, and it's a bit more simplistic than what you see here. But when you transfer over at the 4 months, which is the 4 months regression, you go into a more established pattern of sleep that then will it will develop further as time goes on. But also you want to, it will lengthen, but the component parts are, fairly similar. So a sleep cycle starts off with, the first part when your child is starting to fall asleep. And so that's kind of like if you haven't nodded off on the sofa, you feel a bit dozy, but you can sort of jolt yourself awake. And then you get into the kind of the deeper part of the sleep. And so I always say, if you do want to hold or rock your baby to sleep and you're finding it difficult to put them down, wait about 20-30 minutes, and then it's probably easier to do so. But that's not necessarily the answer you're looking for, but it's worth considering if you're having a struggle, especially perhaps with newborns or tiny ones, if you're one of those people who has those. And then we come around to the kind of the coming out of the deep sleep, but it's the last part, this element of what's called sort of partial arousal, where we come into this kind of conscious moment. And this is the key thing that causes the majority of sleep issues. It's very easy for a child to wake up at that point, and actually pretty much at the end of most sleep cycles there is this moment of wakefulness. So if a child has needed help to go to sleep in the first place, to get into the sleep cycle, when they come to the end of that sleep cycle, what we can find is that they wake up and they look for that thing to get them to go to sleep again. So that's when we get into things like sleep prop. So a sleep prop, if you haven't heard of it, is an external factor that will get a child to go to sleep. So this could be something like a dummy, it could be rocking, it could be kind of feeding to sleep potentially. Any of these external influences can impact the way that the child wakes up at the end of the sleep cycle. So this is really key to kind of understand. Now, it's also very much the most important thing to say, I think, about my approach is that if it works for you, then it doesn't matter what I'm telling you, you've got to work out that it's right for you. So if you're feeding your child sleep and you're happy with that, and they're sleeping well, you do not need to change anything. Perhaps what this will do is inform you that might be why they're frequently waking. So you kind of hopefully can recognize it and maybe work away from that if that's the choice that you make. So those are I think sleep cycles is what the key thing I love sharing with people if they don't understand. So other kind of sciencey bits, these are stuff that we can help a little bit, or to help understand will mean that we can, understand our children a little bit more and help them to settle. So melatonin, if you haven't heard of it before, is the sleepy hormone. So it helps them to feel sleepy. It doesn't necessarily get them to go to sleep, but it helps them to feel sleepy and it helps them to stay asleep. So it's produced in accordance with a couple of things. The first one is the light level. So when your child kind of gets into a lower light level, it will encourage the melatonin to be produced. So we can play that to our advantage, and it's a bit more difficult. I mean, like, it's still light outside now, and hopefully most of your children are asleep. We need to kind of alter the natural light levels so that we can manage the melatonin levels and help them to increase, which helps them to feel sleepy, which helps you to get them to settle quicker. And the other thing it's produced in accordance with is the body clock. So the circadian rhythm is the fancy term for it, but it's literally the journey that the body goes on. And the body clock can switch into regularity really quickly. So it forms, I suppose, a habit in a way of settling for sleep at certain times. So the key factors in that are mainly the wake up time in the morning can be set by the body clock quite easily, and also the bedtime at night time. So that's why we will always, most sleep consultants will talk about a consistent bedtime being the great way of approaching getting the body clock to feel like it's sleepy, because if it knows that sleep is coming because you regulate that time and have it at a similar time each night, then it will help to produce the melatonin, which helps them to feel sleepy. So that's actually a really kind of powerful thing to understand. So the other kind of sleep sciencey bits, because there's lots to it, but to get the top level stuff really covered, regressions are one of the things. And in fact, someone was asking me today about whether I was going to cover regressions. So I do cover them. I'm talking about them now. But really to say that the 4-month sleep regression is a definite sleep change. It's a pattern change that we've just spoken about. The sleep cycle elongates and it can cause disruption. But like other regressions, it's a developmental change and it doesn't need to last forever. Now, if you have a sleep issue and you're kind of going through a bit of a troublesome phase, it's quite easy to find a regression to fit if you Google hard enough. And I think what I would just suggest that you do is you step back and you go, okay, has my child started to roll over, crawl, talk, walk, be more aware of the world? Because these things can cause them to, I suppose, regress in a way. And it's just the way that their body and their mind processes it. It often happens at nighttime. They're compartmentalizing things. So be kind of aware of what's going on. So we hear of stories such as leaps from Wonder Weeks, or the Huckleberry app will tell you a certain thing might be due to happen. But I would be more led by your child. So what are they showing you? If they're having a disruption and you can see it's from a developmental change, give it a couple of weeks and then that probably should be it done. So hopefully that's helpful. Now, I must talk about the guidelines because I'm a massive advocate of looking at the Lullaby Trust. They have amazing advice and they're really great at kind of having a balanced view around sleep. So the key things and the key factors to look out for are the temperature of the room. It's colder than you think, optimum sleep. So 16 to 21 degrees is the message from them. A clear, safe sleeping space, especially under the age of kind of 1. You don't need lots of teddies, you don't need lots of comforters, no sleep positioners. All of those things are irrelevant. You just need a waterproof, breathable mattress to help them settle in. They have recently, in the last few years, which is great, put out some advice on safe co-sleeping, which I think really gives you the permission to choose that as an option, but know how to do it safely. So have a look at that if you're considering that or doing it. Their room sharing advice is to keep maybe in the same room as you until 6 months. So you need to kind of be aware of that. And they advise to keep dummies. And the reason why I mention this is because I've talked about dummies as being a sleep prop. So you need to kind of consider the role of your dummy in sleep and whether it's helping or hindering you. They talk about, there's a small study and they talk about that, the advice is to consider keeping it up until 6 months. But if it's causing you lots of issues, it might be worth thinking about helping your child to settle without it. So consider what's going on with that. Okay, so the other big thing to talk about is really if your child is poorly, if they've got any kind of underlying health conditions, or if they're teething, I wouldn't necessarily think about making any changes. I'd get them through that, get it addressed, anything medical, obviously talk to your health visitors or GPs, and make sure that you're kind of covered and heading on the road to recovery, because it's very hard to make sleep changes if your child isn't well. So that's important. Right, let's talk about the sleep fundamentals. So these are the key pillars that I like to, I was doing it today on my client calls. I had lots of catch-up calls today. Some clients doing amazingly, some weren't. So we went through these pillars. So firstly, your room environment, what does it look like? Has your child got a good independent space to settle in? And what I mean by that is, are they sleeping in something that's going to give them the ability to move around if they need it? I'll often talk to people who've tried to use something like a Moses basket or Next to Me, and then suddenly their child's too big and they can't move around, and we get them into the freedom of a cot, and it makes a hell of a lot of difference. So consider that. Sleep positions, as I said, aren't recommended. You past the age of 4 months, we talk about kind of, well, probably actually from any age they're safe. A sleeping bag is great. Often we'll be swaddling our newborns, but transitioning into a sleeping bag is great because you don't have to worry about them kicking off the covers and being cold at night. And I don't advise any kind of mobiles or light shows on at sleeping time. It's okay to have them as part of bedtime routine if it helps your child to stay kind of distracted and happy, but not whilst they're trying to sleep. So darkness levels, really key. In fact, another conversation today, client bought a blackout blind, child slept for another hour in the morning. It's like, that's kind of how simple it can be sometimes. Make sure your room is as dark as possible, and that's because of the melatonin levels. Because if we can increase the melatonin or keep it at a good level, it will help your child feel sleepy and stay asleep. So things like travel blackout blinds are great. The Grow Company or other companies do them as well. In my son's room, we always had a travel blackout blinds and then blackout curtains because we wanted to be super short, and it worked. So I would really advise that. I wouldn't suggest any kind of night lights before the age of 2. There's no need for them for the darkness reasons that we've spoken about. And it's only when your child can be perhaps aware of the dark that I would suggest using them, and that's normally too earliest. So just watch out for things like the monitors and the lights that are on them, or the Grow eggs that you can use them. I'm not saying get rid of them, but maybe just put them in less of a visible area. And things that are good to have are things like white noise. So white noise is a brilliant way of creating a constant environment for your little one to sleep in. It can help bridge the gap between the end of the sleep cycle and the beginning, like I was speaking about before. So any kind of moment of wakefulness, the white noise will be there constantly. So it needs to be on a constant conversational level, is how I like to put it. So you need to kind of have it on that level so that it's present, but it's not overbearing or irrelevant in their world, if you see what I mean. So anything that's kind of reactive or goes off after 20 minutes, there are very many products out there that do that. I would suggest that you want something that's constant. So a white noise machine. I've got a code I will send out with the email when I send this out tomorrow with some discounts on for one by Marpack. They're brilliant. Or just use like an untuned radio or an app or on a device. It doesn't matter really. White noise is white noise. And a baby monitor can be good. And actually, I never used to say this because I'm like, don't react too quickly to your child, leave them to see. But sometimes it's really powerful to see what's going on, because then you can say, okay, I know what my child is doing. I can see what's going on. And you want to kind of be able to react accordingly, because sometimes they're just having a little shuffle or a little moan. And if you go in too quickly, you can cause them to be upset more. So it's quite powerful to be able to sort of see what's happening by the monitor. Okay, so the second part of the fundamentals is routines. And this is one of the things I want to I wish I'd sort of put it in a lowercase r, because it's a sort of a very much a softly understanding approach to your child that I would advocate. So I work with something called awake time. So if you're not aware, that means it's the amount of time that your child can stay awake after waking up from either the nighttime sleep or a nap till the next time they need to sleep. And so from that, you can build a pattern of the day. And the reason why I see it as a kind of more of a soft or framework approach is that no one day is going to be the same. It's very hard. I'm sorry if this spoils anyone's hope. It's very hard to have a consistent sleep pattern that's going to be the same every day, because your child will wake at a different time every day, and they might not nap for the same amount of time every day. There are routines that you can do that will force that, but I'm not an advocate of those, because I'm a big believer in kind of letting your child sleep in an independent way rather than being too forced. So be aware of your child's awake time. I put on the right hand side there the different awake times for each age. It's a guide though, so be aware of them, but be kind of child-led when it comes to what you're seeing in them. Those signs of tiredness can creep up quite quickly, so maybe keep an eye on that lower level and make sure that you're sort of observing the tired times signs. Sorry, that can be like starry eyes, looking a bit grumpy with it, kind of pulling ears, yawning, all of those things can be signs that they're ready to sleep again. If you're unsure, test on the first tired sign that you see, or go to that kind of lower level of awake time, and then you can build from that. Maybe then if that doesn't work very well for you, you can go on the second tired sign, or just wait a little bit longer, and you'll soon kind of know and see kind of a difference. The awake times can be shorter in the morning, so be conscious of that. So you want to kind of maybe alter things to be a bit shorter. Again, your child will show you what they do. The most important thing about sleep in the day is that it happens. It's not about where and how. So actually for me, especially when you're trying to make changes for sleep at nighttime, just getting the right amount of sleep for your child in the day is the better thing. And again, client call today, we've just shifted the focus back onto a little bit onto naps, but making the bedtime earlier, because the child's not sleeping brilliantly at nighttime, in the daytime, which is affecting the nights. And that's what happens. A child that's not sleeping well in the day can be affected in the nighttime as well. So in terms of how much sleep your child does need in the day, this is a guide. Again, you need to kind of know, and actually if you look at the National Sleep Foundation recommendations for sleep, the variance is massive. It is huge. It can be from a 4-hour kind of range at any given age, and that's because they need to accommodate for every child being different, which they are. So the best signs that you can have is if your child is in a good state of tiredness, is dealing with the day well, then you're probably in a good zone. If they're a bit kind of grumpy and fussy, and they don't, life's not great for them, they're probably a bit overtired, and that can cause all sorts of issues: early rising, settling issues, waking in the night as well. So I would say with that, you want to encourage more naps in the day if you can, but sometimes that's not as easy, as it said. You can have off days. It can be a bit of a phase, especially around sort of 5 months with short naps. So to compensate for that, the biggest thing you can do is go for an earlier bedtime. Makes no sense logically, because you think you want to make them more tired, but it's about this kind of balance of the day, and you want to be kind of hitting the right amount of sleep for them in a 24-hour period. So if you've missed out on some of the day, make sure you're kind of catching up with night. So don't be afraid of an early bedtime, because overtiredness can cause issues with settling and waking in the night. So let's think about the last part around sort of the routine of the day. Naps and their transitional state. So it really does feel, especially the first year, that there's a nap transition just around the corner. So you might just settle into one kind of pattern, and then suddenly your child can stay awake for longer and they need to drop a nap. So it's all about that awake time extending. It's all about that kind of first nap getting basically later and later. You drop the later naps rather than those first naps. Just shift everything later because they can stay awake for longer. So we've got over there on the right hand side the amount of naps, again, averagely by age. That does vary. For example, I've had a child of 20 months drop to no naps, or 10 months to 1 nap. Don't use that as the excuse to perhaps change things. Look at your child, see what they're showing you. You'll find that they will resist going down for sleep. And they'll probably struggle to sleep for a good amount as well. And that's when bedtime is the key sign. So you might have had a child that settles well at bedtime, suddenly they're not, and they're running around because they're just not tired enough. So those are the sort of the signs. So when we talked about overtiredness earlier, that's that kind of grumpy. Undertiredness is the sort of more cheeky, slightly frustrated way of being, because they're just not tired enough to settle. They don't have enough sleep pressure built up. So when you get closer to the kind of the nap transition points, you often have to make bedtime later to get them more tired, because you're not quite ready to drop those naps. And then when you've got to that nap transition, you've made the decision, you've pushed on with it, it might take a little time to adjust to that. So often what we have to do is then bring bedtime earlier, so you're not making them too overtired, so you're not working at one for the other. So in terms of kind of bedtime routine, so we're talking here about what you do before bed. We've talked about a similar time each night. That's important for the melatonin production. Keeping it simple. It doesn't need to be anything too fancy. things like you don't need to bath every night. It depends on kind of what you're keen on doing or what your child enjoys, because some kids love bedtime routine, others, they just want to go to sleep. So think about it from your point of view. It needs to be this kind of journey to sleep. And so, if you are, heading up to bed, then make sure you're not kind of darting into kind of other rooms or coming up and down stairs or exposing them to too much natural light, as we talked about earlier. Make it this consistent journey to sleep. If you've got an older child, you can draw this out with them. You can do pictures, get them to create their own visual bedtime routine chart to help them navigate kind of through what's happening next. So I would suggest that, and for a younger child that's feeding, a 30-minute bedtime is probably a good space to aim for. Often I'll find that people are dragging on bedtime quite a lot longer than that. I think an hour and a half was my maximum that I've seen in the client. And what happens is that the child just loses their track. They don't know kind of what's going on. So they're not sort of getting the routine. They're not seeing the pattern because it's just elongated too much. So just be conscious of that. And then make sure you're being aware of drowsiness around bedtime. So a child that's very tired can slip into that first stage of sleep we spoke about before. And if you're trying to work on changing your little one's sleep and getting them to sleep perhaps more independently, so removing some of these kind of props we talked about, keep an eye on the drowsiness levels. If they're getting sleepy on a feed or perhaps reading a story, you might want to kind of do something interruptive to help them stay awake. And last I put on there, consider overtiredness, but I've spoken about that quite a lot already. I do talk about it quite a bit because it is really important to share. That's vital for you. So nap routines, basically think of it in a similar way to bedtime, but on a shorter scale. So you don't really need to be doing a long nap routine. You can have a bit of a wind down, so don't go from something super active into right, it's time to sleep, because that doesn't really help them to settle down. Think about kind of maybe a part of a mini nap routine that you might do similar to bedtime. So perhaps that's just closing the curtains, getting into comfy clothes, sleeping bag, that sort of thing. Now, darkness in nap times is also really your friend, and people often question this because they've been told to keep them in the sunlight, but actually we need to use that melatonin production to our advantage. So as dark as you can, so that's where those blackout blinds come in. And if you're trying to settle your child and it's not going well, then if you're looking to make improvements, then give it a go. Maybe, and I never advocate leaving them to be unsettled for a long period of time. You want to kind of help them settle. So you will be there perhaps for maybe 30 minutes maximum. And if that doesn't, if it's not working, you're not going anywhere, just cut to the chase. Do what you used to do, because it's more important that they sleep than how they get to sleep, as we spoke about earlier. And again, worth noting that naps can take a bit of a while, so can take up to sort of 6 weeks to help them to settle down in terms of the nap. So be conscious of that. Sometimes that's a bit frustrating because you just have to keep going, but it's worthwhile as long as you see some improvements. And then some thoughts on short naps. So short naps are one of the things that I get asked a lot about, and we often do those kind of one-to-one 30-minute troubleshooting calls on. So the key things around short naps are to make sure that the awake time's right. They can, overtiredness or undertiredness can cause short naps for different reasons. So you have a think about that. Often it's about extending the awake time rather than shortening it, but sometimes it's shortening it. And then often it's about kind of the settling as well. Dummy's fallen out, they're woken up because they need to be, they've been fed to sleep, things like that, which is something to kind of consider in your situation. 5 months, like I say, is a classic kind of short nap phase. But also I'd say that short naps are okay, as long as you're kind of totaling the sleep in the day, and it's not that you're having to nap every half an hour. Then you're kind of, they don't have to be the thing that you solve. And some babies just have short naps. Again, if they're okay and they're fine in terms of their development and their general being, then don't worry about it. I forgot that I put a big section on overtiredness here because I love to talk about it. So I don't need to go over overtiredness because I think I've spoken about it already. Basically, as I've said at the end, avoid it. Basically, you want to make sure that you're compensating for it, and your early bedtime is your key thing to do there. So let's talk about settling options. So this is kind of my overview of settling, because I'm always surprised when I talk to clients and we discuss this, and I'm very much a fan of saying, what do you think, rather than me going, this is the way you're going to do it, because I need to know where people sit on this sort of scale. So what I mean by that is that there are many methods of doing things, but just to summarize the kind of the key things, you start on this kind of really gentle scale of, being very involved, maybe using something like a pick up, put down model. So this is kind of like when you place your child down, and then if they get upset, you pick them up, and you can decide how long you leave them down for before you pick them up. You can offer reassurance if you need to. Or you could do something like a habit stacking method, which is where you basically go, okay, I'm feeding to sleep, and I'm now going to rock to sleep, and then I'm now going to kind of hold to sleep, and then I'm going to start to place down in the sleep space, and then, maybe pick up. And so you kind of work on this slow basis. So gentle methods will generally be about understanding the kind of the environment of the day, the routine that we've spoken about, but maybe working on things on a slower basis. So on the sort of step up from that, we get into kind of the sort of gradual retreat with sort of pick up. So this is kind of like where you'll be putting your child down to sleep, helping them to settle. So this is all staying with them, and then maybe removing yourself over time. So that's kind of the slightly on the strict side. And then in the middle sits gradual retreat, which it can be called the disappearing chair. It's a very common one, and it works on the basis of kind of be involved, help them, and work a way out over time, and have some sort of boundaries, have some kind of, I suppose, rules, how many days you're going to stay close, how many days you're going to move away, all of those things, to then sort of build on that so you're then less involved than you were, to help them settle themselves. That's the aim. Now moving on to kind of control crying. So this is interval based settling. So it's kind of place your child down, leave the room, let them cry, go back in again, leave the room again, and repeat until they settle. You can comfort when you're in the room, and you can leave them for as long as you like. Some people work on an elongated basis, so they work sort of 5, 7, 8, 10 minutes out of the room on each time they leave. I tend to sort of stick with a number, and that's something we kind of discuss as in kind of clients or through sleep school as well. Then you get to cry it out, and this is one that it gets the bad name that perhaps quite rightly it does, because it's very removed. It's the true form of cry it out, and the phrase was coined about the extinction method. So that's literally leaving your child and not going back in again until the morning, and that's kind of fundamentally it. It's a very it's quite a used method actually in some circles. It's not something that I would necessarily jump to. I don't think I've ever done an extinction method on a child. I just don't necessarily think it's right, because I'm a big believer that there's always a reason, and you have to find that reason and perhaps work with it. So not my zone, shall we say. But I would say that if you were to ask me where I sat, I'd probably sit somewhere in the middle, and I vary my techniques depending on kind of where my clients sit. So it depends on what your thoughts are, but that's the different options for settling. A few other things to consider. So who should be doing settling, right? So if you are the main settler and you're feeding to sleep, it's possibly better if you're trying to make changes that it's not you that settles. If your child's quite dependent on yourself, then it might be better to get a partner to do it, be very involved, reduce the upset, but reduce the confusion, especially with little babies. They sometimes are like, well, why aren't you feeding me? Or, why aren't you doing the tricks that you used to? But whereas if a new person comes in, it can really help the process. After 3 days, rotate it, make sure you're involved, because we don't want to switch one reliance onto another, of course. Now, I would say if you're going to start to work on sleep, I would encourage you to put your child down awake and work from that basis, because you can always pick them up and help them to feel more sleepy. But if we're starting off trying to help them to be independent, then that's what I would suggest that you do. And then, as I said here, think about what works for you. If it works, like, if you're rocking your child and they sleep well, or if you've made a change, And again, talking to a client today, we said, I said, well, it's not perfect because I'm not out of the room yet. I said, but your child's sleeping. You don't need to tick all the boxes if it's working for them and it's working for you, because they were worried that the next step might cause more upset. It's fine, and if it's fine for you. I'm really a massive believer in that. The key thing is to find that you're moving forward and you're happy in your place. You can always tweak things. I suggest always assessing something after about 3 to 5 days. That's always the key thing to see if it's working. So let's talk a little bit about kind of night wakings. Is it normal? Because there's again, if you can read lots of literature on whether a child wakes in the night, and yeah, it is normal for a child to wake in the night. I mean, we've talked about the fact that every person wakes through the end of their sleep cycle, so it's very normal for people to kind of wake. But just think about where you sit and what your kind of goals are. So, if your child, I mean, yeah, I often get people coming to me, and yeah, recent clients are examples of that. They've got a child that's waking 6 or 7 times in the night at the age of 6 months. It's not really great for them. It's not improving, so they're very keen on kind of reducing those wakes, but they're happy with 1, maybe 2 wakes in the night. So that's their goal, and that's what they want to achieve, and that's something to aim for. And this is where we come into kind of how you assess whether the fundamentals of sleep are impacting your child's ability to sleep for long periods of night. So the environment, the routine of the day, and the settling. If you make changes to that, will your nights just naturally improve? And there's also nutrition to be considered in all that. Not an area that I'm an expert on, so I don't tend to talk about it in detail. But that's one side of it. Versus, I just need to get my child to sleep. And there are people that want that, and I help them as well. We do make sure that everything is, boxes ticked for the fundamentals. We might push a little bit more because their objectives, perhaps they're going back to work. Perhaps it's just got a bit too much. I had put up a post today about Maternal Mental Health Week, which it is this week, and about a bit of a story when I had some really dark days when my daughter was born, and I just said, look, if anyone's needing any help, then please do reach out. And I invited a couple of people to this sessions. Hopefully they've turned up, because it's all about kind of knowing that sleep is hard. Like if you're tired and you really can't get your child to sleep better, it can be really, really tricky, and I know that, and that's why I want to do these sessions and I want to help people. So yeah, we get into that kind of sort of cycle of trying to make sure we understand what's going on and thinking about what's okay for you in the night. So in terms of considerations from feeding, said I wasn't going to talk about it, but I will give you some considerations. Feed your child if you think it's appropriate, but try and not feed them entirely back to sleep. This is one of the kind of sleep consultant hacks. So if you can feed your child and put them down a little bit more awake, a bit more conscious, then often they can settle more independently and sleep for longer. And the other thing around feeding in the night is the dream feed. So I'm not convinced about the dream feed. I would rather a child slept for their own amount of time, so how long they want to sleep, than being woken up, well, not necessarily woken up, but being fed to get them to sleep for longer. I think it just helps them to know that they can do it themselves rather than relying on something else. However, if it works for you, if you're feeding your child at 10 o'clock and they're sleeping for a long period of time, then maybe it's working. So don't have to change it. It's all very much dependent on your child. So other thoughts around kind of common issues, and again, like I said, often we talk about things like early rising on the one-to-one kind of 30-minute calls that I offer. It's a common thing. It's a real common thing. Well, we've sort of passed the time of year that I spend ages talking about it, because that's the clock change in March. But a lot of it's down to light. Some of it is down to overtiredness, and some of it can be down to kind of noises in the house. So just be conscious of those. So in terms of how to fix it, I would suggest that you identify what could be going on and then sort of take action. So this might look like compensating for overtiredness, extra blackouts, and just be kind of conscious of what's going on there. And the clock's changing, like I said, they do kind of have a big impact on that kind of thing as well. So older children, if any of you have got older children are having issues, this is a generic presentation. I may feel like I've talked about babies, but all the fundamentals do apply to older children as well. So consider the time of bedtime for your older child. I know, and I'll put my hands up, say we let our bedtime slip a little bit through lockdown, just chilled out a bit more. But actually, now that they're back at school and they're tired, I know that they need to go to bed at a decent time. Avoiding screens before bed is really important. A child that sees a screen like an hour or so in the hour before they go to sleep can suffer from melatonin production going down. That's because the blue light that's emitted from the screens can affect the melatonin production. That's been proven scientifically. And then think about identifying the issues. Often we kind of find that there is some anxiety going on, or there's some behavioural kind of things that we need to perhaps address. So there are this great technique that I did some training with Lindsay Hookway, who is she's a holistic sleep coach, and she is very much on the gentle side of things. And I love some of the suggestions that she has, and I implement them with my my clients as well. She has a thing called love bombing. So if you've got a child, this works for like separation anxiety as well. If you've got a child that's anxious around bedtime, just shower them with love, hugs, kisses. You're amazing. Just trying to show them that they're really very much the center of your world, or the centers of your world if you've got more than one kid, and just helping them to understand that it's all okay and they are secure in their attachment to you, which is often kind of what can cause issues. If more anxiety kind of tips, you can do things like breathing. So star breathing, up and down the hands. So breathe in and then out as you go down, can be really great just to calm a moment. I may have had a slight moment earlier with my children when they weren't going to brush their teeth, and I just stepped back and I just took some deep breaths because I needed to calm down, and it was fine. And I was okay, and we went back and we brushed our teeth and it was all right. So works for adults as well. And then think about kind of, if you have sort of put aside any sort of anxiety issues, think about how you can reward them. What are they doing that's brilliant? Are they just getting into bed nicely? The next day, talk about it, reward them. And then if things don't go so well, maybe consider kind of a consequence thing. This is a sort of a side thing that we talk about with clients if they've got a very cheeky toddler that's pushing the boundaries a little bit more. So regressions and illnesses. I've spoken about regressions already. I probably went into too much detail earlier. But illnesses I'll touch on quickly. So they are often these kind of things that will put the bump in the road. They'll be the thing that causes your sleep to go off track, and people will struggle to get it back. So my tip is to say, try and keep bedtime as similar as possible if your child is poorly, because it will help you to steer that way back on track. Teething is a kind of the classic one. They might be all right at bedtime, but then they might be really needy in the night, and that's okay. And I think what you need to sort of consider is, whilst they're still ill, whilst the tooth hasn't quite got through yet, they may need some cuddles, they may need medication, they may need extra feeds for comfort. Work through that. But once they're better, or once the tooth's come through, then maybe just think about getting back on track and sort of getting back to kind of where you were. Don't let those things be the excuse for bad sleep, really. These are the kind of things that I wanted to talk to you about. They're the fundamentals to get your sleep back on track. So I'd love to know, and you can let me know now or later, if you have identified what you might need to change. And I think you can start to make a plan tonight. You can start to think about the things that I've spoken about, and hopefully that's going to be the starting point for your improvement in terms of your little one's sleep and the whole family sleep, because that's what is also important to remember. If not, I'm kind of here to help. Obviously, that's absolutely what I do. The 3 options that I spoke about earlier, I will send out more detail on that. And Sleep School, which starts next Friday, that's last month's date, so apologies, it shouldn't be the 16th of April, it's the 14th of May. I've already got 2 people signed up, so that means that there's potentially like 8 spaces left. So they go quite quickly, and I'd love to have you on board. If you're looking for more one-to-one support sessions, I'm just finalising my availability I have finalised my availability for May. You can just jump onto sleeptimeconsulting.co.uk, have a look, find the waiting list, and tell me what's going on, and we can find the best solution for you. So yeah, thank you so much for coming to join me today. I am going to stop streaming that and come back to here to see if there's any kind of questions. So yeah, please do let me know. Sometimes the questions take a little bit time to come through. I don't know if you're kind of typing, but I'm very happy to spend a bit of time talking about your situation, or if you want to come on live and ask anything, then absolutely fine to sort of do so. If nobody has any questions, then no problem whatsoever. I do a Q&A session every Monday over on Facebook and on my Instagram as well. So you can, if you're not already following me, that's Sleep Time Consulting on both of those platforms. And I share lots of tips. Today, I did an amazing talk, and I sometimes schedule in these lives. I'd really encourage, if you've got little ones that are kind of 6 months onwards and you're thinking about weaning, the health allergy coach I was talking today, and we had a really great chat about that. Mark, so I've got a question about my 6-month-old and 3 a.m. wakings for an hour, so split nights. Okay, so yeah, and thank you, Karen. Yes, lovely. Very helpful. Good. So yeah, split nights are a phrase. I'm not sure where it came from. It sort of appeared once, and people now talk about it. It makes sense. So split night is when you have a child that will sleep well for the first half of the night, and then in the second half of the night, they will be more disturbed. And so it's sort of split in two. Makes sense, doesn't it? There are reasons for that. The main reason, the reason to explain the better part of the first section of the night is that there's more sleep pressure that is apparent from the day. And so you find that a child will sleep well for the first half of the night, and then in the second half of the night, your child will have a lighter sleep pattern. It's just a way that the pattern slightly changes, proportionately lighter sleep. They're easier to wake, and their sleep pressure from the day isn't quite so great. So in terms of addressing it, it's about firstly eliminating, going through the fundamentals, right? So is the room warm enough? Often they can wake up because they're cold or perhaps too hot. Is the room dark enough? And because that light levels can be affecting what's going on with what's happening. And then what's happening with the routine of the day? Are they overtired? Because if they're having struggles with naps and they're not sleeping, so 6 months old would be on somewhere like about 3 hours of sleep in the day. And if you're getting much less than that, it can be causing these kind of split nights or waking there. And then the other thing is the settling. Again, a client, child was waking up at 4. We've introduced self-settling, now waking up at nearly 6, nearly there. So those hopefully things are to help you there, Mark. Okay, so Jade, my 3-month-old always falls asleep at 8 p.m. We currently have him in the living room with us and take him upstairs as we go to bed, but he's starting to be disturbed by this. Should I be putting him in his crib upstairs and using a monitor? Is he too young? Right, so I have to refer to the guidelines, which are 6 months, the same room as you. So you can assess that to your own kind of level of guidance. I can't advise on that basis, as you can probably understand. Could you maybe section off the room and try and keep it kind of quieter, so that when he's in the sort of the deep sleep, you can take him upstairs, or just think about maybe doing it at a time whereby you might be okay to feed. It's a difficult question for me to answer, because I hear you, and it's one of those things you perhaps need to judge, but you can always use lots of encouragement when you take them upstairs to get them to resettle. It's a young age. Okay, Nikki saying thanks very much. Well, thank you. What are your thoughts on creating a dark enough environment for good sleep in the evening while baby's under 6 months? Okay, similar sort of question. Okay, so I think if you can find a dark corner, section it off. It's hard. It's really hard. I mean, what do? You kind of with them all day. You want to chill out, but then they're still there. But the advice is there for a reason. So you need to kind of consider your own circumstances, situation, and see if you can turn the lights off maybe for a bit. It's a very hard one to call. Mark saying very short day nap. So right, go for an earlier bedtime. Try and address the naps. If you want to chat about the short naps, please do get in touch and we can put a call in maybe to talk through it. Ruby saying, very helpful, thank you. My nearly 5-month-old breastfeeds for sometimes over an hour pre-bed. A lot of that he seems to be sleep feeding. Should I stop him from feeding or just hope that he gets more efficient and wait until he falls off? So at this age, I would suggest when they're kind of slowing down, and so you're kind of noticing that it's more comfort feeding perhaps, then I would probably remove from the feed, because you need to have that time to wind, and you need to kind of be able to know that they're fully fed. But if you're trying to transition into kind of more conscious settling, so less feeding to sleep, which might be something you're thinking about, then I would take them off, and you kind of keep them awake. If they're still hungry, put them back on again, but it's all about that transition if you're making it. Okay, cool, Jason, thanks. Zara, so good nights for my 1-year-old involve one night waking where I breastfeed and she falls asleep feeding and sleeps until morning. Okay, self-set to sleep at the start of that. I'm about to stop breastfeeding, so I'm nervous how to get her back to sleep during the night waking, as normal self-settling techniques don't seem to work during the night. You might be surprised if you just start to just wean the time off in terms of the feed that you're doing, and then the reliance becomes kind of less. So I would do that first, take it on, see how you get on. If you're you don't necessarily need to use perfect self-settling techniques when you're trying to wean off that, because if you can, what you're trying to do is to break her habit of feeding in the night. I'd suggest so lessen the amount of time you're feeding, and then hopefully the habit will kind of reduce, then resettle in another way that doesn't involve the perhaps the extra kind of upset that you're expecting, and hopefully that will just go in time. Okay, so Lindsay, thank you so much, Kate, super helpful and informative. Oh, lovely, thank you. So little one is 15.5 months and I still feed her to sleep. It's always worked for us and always set well, so there's no need to change it. I'm conscious about when to encourage her to self-settle at night and move away from feeding. She sleeps happily in the car or the buggy during the day. We can't get her to go to sleep in the cot unless I feed it. Obviously, we've never pushed it. My immediate answer is you don't need to change it unless it's a problem. There is no, and again, if you look at kind of some of the more sort of gentle sleep tribe people, of which I, follow, respect, and talk about positively, your child will, at the age of, 15, 18, won't still need to feed to sleep. So if it's working for you, you don't need to change it. If you're looking if you're thinking about making the change, I just start to think about kind of maybe lessening the time that they feed for, and maybe distracting with something else. But it's what works for you. I hope that's kind of sort of clear. Okay, cool. Mary Grace, oh great, because you sent me a message earlier, and I'm so pleased you got the link in the end. Thanks so much for the useful info. 7-month-old, but the last 3 weeks he's very broken sleep and waking every 2 hours. We rock to settle, he falls asleep, and as soon as he gets put down his cot, he cries. It's like a vicious cycle. We are so tired. How can we fix this? So that is a good example of a sleep prop. So you're rocking him to sleep, placing him down. He gets unsettled as he, touches the mattress. So I would just try and think about, maybe putting him down, offering lots of reassurance while he's down. If he gets upset, pick him up, and maybe you can do it in many ways. If you want to talk about it in more detail, obviously, I'm happy to do so, or consider one of the options I talked about. But you can help him to fall asleep in a different way and then move away from that. That's probably the key thing. I think you're waking in the night at the sort of the two hour mark. That's a classic kind of issue with perhaps the settling. It might be, you want to consider the other things as well, but it might well be that by addressing the settling, you will help that situation as well. Don't feel that it's a situation you can't solve. It definitely is. And that's what I always sort of, people will ask, can you help me? And that's why I have the waiting list form that I put out there, because it allows you to tell me what's going on and me to go, I think that's what I would change. And that means that I know that I can help. And if I can't help, there's not been many people, although I did take a call from a lady with a 4-day-old child the other day, and I was like, oh gosh, I think you might need to go and talk to your midwives, because they probably can help you better than me. I can't help everyone, but I would suggest that, that would be the way to change things, Mary Grace. And if you need extra help, let me know. Okay, Lindsay's come back. So if we did change it, then it would just be to encourage her to self-settle herself, as feel that she needs to be able to do this, whether or not we need to worry about it. Okay, I think just start on that journey. Just literally go, okay, I'm going to make some changes and navigate through it. Hopefully we're giving you some sort of thoughts on what to do and how to do it. Take your time. or go quickly, depends on kind of what you need. But there's no kind of pressure at that age to be doing it. It's just about what works and perhaps reducing the reliance. Do you know what? The people will often say, what's the best age to sleep train? And there is no best age. There are certain times when it's tricky, and that's when, you know, perhaps they're poorly, or if they are teething, or if they've got any kind of medical issues. But otherwise, I would say that it's really down to you and what's right for you. So yeah. Right, I'll just allow any time for any questions. I think someone had their hand up, but I can't. I think it might have gone down again. I can't see that happening now. So if you have no further questions, I'd just really like to thank everyone for joining. It was nice. I know some people joined late, so hopefully you can catch the recording, and obviously I'll be sending that out tomorrow. Just a reminder that yeah, the next Sleep School, if you're interested, it starts next Friday. There is a code that I'll put in the into the email for discount and everything. But I'd love to kind of, if you need any extra help, or if you're still a bit lost, then I will be here for you to help. So thank you, Louise. Thanks for all your comments as well. Really nice to know that it's gone down well. So I will chat to you soon. Come follow me over on social media, or keep an eye on my emails. All right, take care. Bye-bye.